Black Myth Wukong is not a Souls game, and that's why I love it. I'm not a huge fan of Souls-like games for various reasons, but this monkey game from China really struck me. We have Fresh Monkey Boy with drip, Big Baby, Giant Bong Stick, and most importantly, John Wukong.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man.
I literally started this game with no expectations and I was blown away. It starts with Fresh Monkey Prince of Wagwo, and he's on some next level enemy timing with his moves. Son Wukong was just aura-farming the whole intro until he got jumped, and now we play as this random monkey named John Wukong. I know this video is about why it's great, but after this great intro I'm already kinda disappointed because we play as a mute monkey and I can't stand mute characters. I liked Wukong's funny and mischievous personality. I wish he had stayed like that, and personally it would have made the experience so much better for me. Imagine playing as Son Wukong who lost his powers and memory, and we the player join him on his journey to get those back. Yeah, I know that's essentially what the plot is about, but I preferred if it was actually Son Wukong that talked and joked. But before I even had enough time to get irritated because of John Wukong, I was greeted by the combat system. And it was great. It felt smooth, fast paced, and when you dodged perfectly, it felt incredibly rewarding. What I really liked were the spells, where you could basically call your gang for backup or transform to some of the monsters you previously defeated. Now to the story. The first chapter is basically just an introduction to the game and its mechanics. A very linear exploration and enemies. It's really just for you to get started. Things slowly pick up pace in the second chapter. We start chapter 2 and are thrown into the desert, where we meet my personal favorite boss of that chapter, Tiger Vanguard. It's a literal tiger that's drinking the blood of his enemies and calls you a loser before you fight him, and he does all of that in an Irish or British accent, I don't know.
I'll serve your dimwit full up for supper. Myself. Ain't you that old loser?
His design is incredible. I mean, just look at his face and tell me he doesn't have Black Air Force energy. Even though I got stomped by him quite a few times, I just couldn't be angry or frustrated because it was so much fun fighting him over and over again. The first real boss of the game is also the final boss of chapter 2. And oh my days, I struggled beating this sand rat. But you know what? I didn't even mind. In other games like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, I would have quit a long time ago, but not here. The yellow wind stage was incredibly hard to beat, but didn't feel unfair. Every time I messed up and died, I wasn't really frustrated, nor did I feel punished. It felt like it was completely on me, and I loved that. It took me a couple of days to beat this boss because I searched for ways to level up and get my hand onto some magic pills before fighting him. What I didn't realize on my first playthrough is that there is an item called Wind Tamer, and with that item you can stop his hurricanes and beat him even faster. So I fought him on hard mode and still managed to have fun. After beating the yellow wind stage, we continued to the next chapter. And I have to say, chapter 3 was kinda disappointing. I didn't really like the map, the bosses weren't as exciting as in chapter 2, and everything had a very weird vibe to it. I just wanted to get through that chapter as fast as possible. One of the reasons for that was the Pagoda realm. I hated it so much because it felt like a fever dream. What made it so horrible for me are the enemy types. They just have a nightmarish design, and regular enemies have some kind of curse on them. They felt incredibly uncomfortable to fight against, especially with always being near the edge. Then there's this constant debuff where you lose half of your health because of some psychic tricks from those lantern wardens. And it doesn't really stop there. What kinda saved the Pagoda realm for me was the boss at the end of it, Captain Wisevoice. The fight was kinda cool, and I liked the part where we had to dodge his attacks by standing between the lines. It took me so many tries just to find out how this one attack worked, and then it was rather easy to beat him. His design also looks like something straight out of a fever dream. I think that's the whole point of the Pagoda realm. It's supposed to be uncomfortable because it's a literal jail. But before we continue, I gotta give honorable mentions to the secret Erlang fight in this chapter. For me, it's better than the actual final boss of the third chapter. One aspect where I have to praise Souls games is the open world mechanics they have. In Elden Ring, if the place is visible, you can probably go there. See that big ass castle in the background? Yeah, let's go explore it. In Wukong, if you try to explore the world, all you get is invisible walls that keep you from going any further, and linear maps that go from one boss to another. And I think that's quite frustrating. What also bothered me was that the maps were very big, but also very empty. So it really felt like a generic Unreal Engine map to me, rather than a world I want to go and explore. One of my favorite things to do in video games is exploring the environment, something you could only do in a limited way in Black Myth Wukong. That's a big reason why Assassin's Creed is one of my favorite series of all time. Its open world feels alive and wants you to explore. As a huge history fan, walking through Alexandria with Bayek felt almost magical. Seeing all those historical buildings was incredible. But the highlight for me was the Library of Alexandria. Exploring such an iconic place, even virtually, made the experience feel personal and immersed me incredibly into the game. That sense of immersion is something Wukong just couldn't match for me. Talking about Assassin's Creed, why didn't they implement a climbing mechanic in this game? This is literally a monkey game and it has no climbing? I'm kinda disappointed. And if we're already being negative, might as well continue a little. Even though I praise the combat a lot and still think it's great, I realized one huge error in the combat. It's kinda repetitive. You smash light attack, you smash heavy attack, dodge enemies, cast spells on them, and that's basically it. So they really could work a little more on that aspect of the game. Alright, enough of my rant. Chapter 4 was quite nice with a lot of different types of enemies and areas to explore. The exploration part in this chapter was better compared to chapter 3. The 100 Eyes Taoist boss fight was quite hard, but I got the Weaver's Needle after defeating the Dusk Whale. And after that, he was relatively easy to beat. What sucked about his boss were the hitboxes. They kinda glitched in that fight. Sometimes I was literally feeding him straight hands and the game just wouldn't register it. But overall, very solid chapter. Chapter 5 was really cool with its lava world and new enemy types. But the Yaksha King boss fight stood out the most for me in that chapter. It's probably one of my favorite fights in the entire game. He had extremely cool design and moves, so it felt incredibly cinematic fighting this boss. And that's what I loved about Wukong so much. Compared to Dark Souls and other Souls games, it's a lot more cinematic. The dodging is probably the best cinematic in a Souls game, game I've ever played. Dark Souls, Elden Ring and Bloodborne all have the dodge roll, which is okay and very useful. But in comparison to the dodge mechanic in Wukong, it feels quite bland and pale. Probably my favorite chapter after Yellow Sand. Chapter 6 is called Unfinished, and it feels like that. I already said that the map design isn't the best, but chapter 6 is literally just flying on a cloud over an empty area searching for bosses. Even though the world design isn't the best in this chapter, the bosses definitely were. The Supreme Inspector was fun to fight against even though he's 90% in the air. But if you use the fan, it's quite a balanced fight. But the best fight in the whole series for me personally is the final fight against Wukong himself. I love that we had the Wukong gear and we pulled off a focused hit with the stance. He could just block it in such a way that my monkey brain couldn't even comprehend what just happened. Same thing goes for the gourd. If you use it unwisely, he will take a sip out of it and heal himself. The whole fight is basically just Sun Wukong aura farming even after his death. Some people might say that Black Myth Wukong isn't actually a Souls-like, even though it has a dodge mechanic, a bonfire system and uncustomizable difficulty. But I couldn't care less about that. It's a great game overall and I don't define my game's greatness by its genre. Black Myth Wukong took a lot of the things that I didn't like about Souls games and turned them into something I'm very fond of now. The combat system is different from other From Software games and the game is more narrative driven while still maintaining a good challenge. And that's why I love Black Myth Wukong.